Darkest Dungeon is a game, and is one of the most grueling and triumphant experiences that I have ever had the pleasure of dragging myself through. Everything you need to know about the game is said in the warning after the beautiful opening animatic. Darkest Dungeon is about making the most of a bad situation. Quests will fail or must be abandoned. Heroes will die, and when they die, they stay dead. Progress autosaves constantly, so actions are permanent. The greatest hint to survive the whole experience and not rage quit due to your own ineptitude is at the start. Something I didn't heed on my first playthrough, unfortunately. Thankfully, there's always fresh souls arriving on the stagecoach, seeking both adventure and fame in the shadow of the... The ominous title sequence is beautiful, but you still don't know what you're in for. Let's talk about how my game started before anything else.
You will arrive along the old road. It winds with a troubling, serpent-like suggestion through the corrupted countryside, leading only, I fear, to ever more tenebrous places. There is a sickness in the ancient, pitted cobbles of the old road, and on its writhing path, you will face viciousness, violence, and perhaps other damnably transcendent terrors. So steel yourself, and remember there can be no bravery without madness. The old road will take you to hell, but in that gaping abyss, we will find our redemption.
After seeing an opening cutscene, you'll start with two characters, Reynold and Dismas. This is where you learn the basics and that's it. The rest you'll have to figure out for yourself. In Darkest Dungeon, you have to walk from left to right as you go from one dungeon to the next. On the way there, or in the room itself, you'll find various combat encounters, obstacles, and curios along the way through the dungeon. Curios are items of interest your character can interact with. They range from simple stuff to eldritch altars that summon boss-level abominations. As if the game wasn't hard enough, some curios can affect your stress bar if you use an incorrect item on them, or just get unlucky when you interact with them. This sounds like a perfect time to bring up stress, as it's the most integral part of the gameplay. Throughout any dungeon, there are various dangerous things you can encounter that will cause you to take stress damage. Using curios, getting hit with a critical attack, ability, or even just existing can stress your party out. Stress, unlike health, is a lot more set in stone. There's only so many ways you can reduce it, and you'll want to reduce it, or this can happen. When someone reaches 100 stress, they literally go sicko mode and start ignoring your commands, doing dumb shit. Sometimes they'll literally kill themselves or stress the rest of your party out by acting like total cunts. Speaking of, everyone in this game is a piece of shit. The narrator, your characters, the enemies, and the goddamn fucking caretaker taking up a slot I need.
The poor caretaker. I fear his long-standing duties here have affected him.
And even yourself. That's right, you. In the Darkest Dungeon, your job isn't to clear dungeons and beat bosses, no. Your job is that of the careless slave trader.
Send this one to journey elsewhere, for we have need of sterner stock.
Hire new people from the stagecoach and send them into the dungeons, and when they're stressed out, diseased, or now possessing a personality more toxic than a Britney Spears song, you'll ditch them, sack them. Their existence costs money and time is money, friend. Wait, who the fuck wrote this fucking thing? Oi, Jeff!
Yeah?
Who wrote this fucking script?
I think it was the intern.
Well, fire his dog ass and get me a new intern, Jesus Christ. See, that wasn't so hard, was it? Just like that. Hire, dungeon, use them, abuse them, and then be rid of them when they're no longer worth it. Cause the various buildings in town cost money to use. Diseased? Go to the sanatorium. Stressed out? Go to the bar for some debauched R&R. But you'll barely be using these. It's simply way more effective to fuck off these destitute adventurers and go hire some fresh ones. The ones worth keeping are the ones that will pay you back dividends. Except healers. Don't throw away too many healers. The last thing you want is an unbalanced party with no healer. So in order to min-max your adventurer turnover rate, you need to upgrade buildings. Particularly the stagecoach, as more upgrades there means more unaware adventurers for the cause, and potentially better quality ones at that. To upgrade buildings, you'll need to hoard and collect one of two resources in this game: heirlooms. I still don't understand how heirlooms repair and improve buildings in the hamlet. Are they using them as bricks or something? Gold, on the other hand, is way more impermanent. If heirlooms are a safe bet to improve the hamlet, then gold is merely for investment. Your adventurer's abilities need improving, at least the successful ones. When an adventurer gains a resolve level, you'll need to upgrade their gear, as well as their abilities to improve their performance with gold. If they get stressed out or diseased, you'll throw gold at that too. And if they die, consider all of that gold investment gone. Heirlooms are a much safer bet to collect in the early game. You don't need too much gold anyway if you're laying off every broken adventurer at the start. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the story. Well, it's simple. In fact, it's so basic that the game gives it all away at the start.
You remember our venerable house, opulent and imperial. It is a festering abomination. I beg you, return home, claim your birthright, and deliver our family from the ravenous, clutching shadows of the darkest dungeon.
Obviously, there's more to it than just that, but the story is pretty clear and concise. Everything else you'll find in the game adds flavor to the situation and setting your heroes find themselves in. Most of these little juicy tidbits are delivered to you by the buttery smooth voiceover this game is carried with.
Mortality clarified in a single strike.
Simply known as the Ancestor, the same man who started this whole Lovecraftian jaunt through the hamlet, as well as the one who bit his own bullet in the opening. His disembodied voice narrates the whole game for you.
Huddled together, furtive and vulnerable. Rats in a maze.
A lot of it you'll hear over and over again, but it never gets repetitive. At the start of the game, he's sort of like a shoutcaster to your escapades. But as the game progresses, you'll find small hints in his voice, which give way to the lurking darkness inside the Ancestor this whole time.
Impressive haul, if you value such things.
When talking about the Sonorous Prophet, for instance, he gets offended that the man is still alive after murdering him multiple times for daring to prophesize that he will be the one to bring about oblivion to the planet. When loading up the Necromancer's dungeon for the third time, he reveals that he had a part to play in the creation of necromancy, and used it to give his companions infinite life as they revived each other on and on forever. Of course, that was after he murdered them all. There's numerous cases and situations like these, but it all paints a picture of a man who is regretful of his discovery of the antediluvian portal. But as the game progresses, more and more is revealed. Suddenly, the man who was unwittingly opened what is literally an oblivion gate doesn't seem so friendly. Rather, it seems it's almost like something he wanted, and when you face him at the end of the game, as a stage of the final boss, he reveals his desires openly.
You still foolishly consider yourself an entity separate from the whole. I know better. And I will show you.
We don't even know if this is the real him or some maddening hallucination. This tone is kept throughout every aspect of the game. It paints a grim, dark Lovecraftian story and experience. The art design is the biggest selling point to this. Every enemy and boss looks beautiful, and more importantly, totally unique whilst also being inspired by many other lores. An example I always love to point at is the skeletons in the ruins. They're simple, they look exactly like every other video game skeleton, but the art design in Darkest Dungeon really makes them endearing to look at, pleasing to the eyes. As the game progresses, you'll find an evolution of this style, showcased by the Bone Bearer. Still a skeleton, but way more interesting to look at, and totally fitting within the aesthetics of the Darkest Dungeon. Like everything else in this experience, the gameplay is simple at the start, but complex and intricate as you progress. You've got 17 characters to choose from, each with their own quirks that come and go, abilities to choose from when fighting or camping, stats like resistances and trap disarm chance, tiers of equipment your character has, as well as 2 slots to put in extra items with positives and negatives. There's 4 ranks or positions our heroes and their enemies can appear in. Each ability in the game has a position that you must be in to use it, and each ability's chance to hit as well as deal damage is determined by your character's stats, which are determined by your character's quirks, items, equipment, class. Did you get all that? I hope you did, because I ain't explaining it again. This is just surface level stuff. I haven't even touched on stuff like protection, marks, blights, bleeds, heals, stress heals, actions, boss gimmicks. Jesus, it's just too much. Alright, let's start by simplifying things here. You need your standard D&D party to be successful in this game. Tank, DPS, healer, and finally something useful in the back. You've got a bunch of different locations you can send your party to as well. The quirks your heroes have will always make them good at one thing and bad at something else. So don't jump into the Warrens willy-nilly. If one of your heroes gets more stressed out in the Warrens, then don't fucking send them to the Warrens. Fuck, how hard is it? Also, buy a bunch of shit to help you guys out. They're gonna need food to avoid hunger checks, or they'll lose health and take stress. As you already know, because you hopefully don't have a smooth brain, stress equal bad. That's right, wow, you got it. So now that your party is either ready or set for failure, regardless, once you get into a dungeon, you've got to do a task and win to go home. Losing means everyone dies, or you retreat and take a buttload of stress with no lube. So don't die, obviously. When you encounter a curio, try to figure out what the right item to use on it is. No! Burning the books is obviously a bad idea, for instance, and I don't recommend it. When fighting an enemy party, they often mirror yours. High threat in the back and tanks in the front. You'll eventually learn the hard way what stuff is more dangerous than others. A lot of the combat comes down to RNG, but it's your choice whether or not you do something stupid. Stop, think, look at the ability you want to use. You want to blight that guy when he has 100% blight protection and you only have a 110% chance to apply the effect? Obviously you'd apply the blight. Who could have predicted such a tragedy? Don't be stupid. Darkest Dungeon is a big brain game. I mean, my brain's growing as I write this script. That or it's a tumor. Anyway, the point is that the game's got a whole lot of depth, and it's up to you to make the good and bad choices. You will lose battles, you will lose parties, and you will learn. Once you actually win a fight, you may get some rewards. Heirlooms, gold, or all of the above. Inventory management is important. You'll never be able to carry everything. It's almost like a skill in of itself. An easy way to know what to get is if you need to advance in the game easier and quicker, then get heirlooms. If you need gear to maintain your main party so that they can fight harder battles, collect gold. One little bit of advice, always bring at least one key. Your party has something called a scouting chance, meaning that every room that you clear or curio that you use could potentially trigger scouting. Scouting reveals the areas ahead of you, letting your party prepare for the fight. Your party can never be surprised by a scouted enemy. If you're lucky, you might be able to scout out a secret room. This secret room contains a chest that will either give you a lot of loot or a little bit of loot. The difference is whether or not you use the key. 250 gold and 1 inventory slot for a solid chance at fat stacks? That's up to you. I pretty much just explained the whole essence of the game perfectly. Prior preparation prevents poor performance. No matter how much you prepare, the greatest and most temperamental of the game's mechanics is only ever managed and never dealt with entirely. Stress. I may have spoken briefly on it earlier, but unless you play the game, you'll never understand the gravity stress has on it. The only way you can deal with stress is by using a gesture or houndmaster, or using the right curio to reduce it. Camping or getting a virtue instead of an affliction can also reduce stress, but that only happens when you reach 100, and I don't recommend trying to reach 100 stress at any point in the game. Virtues don't appear often unless you build to make them do so, but even if you do that, you don't want to be tempting fate. Virtues apply 1 of 5 buffs to your party members, and reduce stress for everyone else when you achieve one. Camping is the other big deal to heal stress. If a dungeon run is long enough, you'll be given some firewood so that your party can have a brief little reprieve from the ravenous clutching shadows. This is where our hero's other abilities come into play. You've got 12 points to spend on these abilities, and they all cost differing amounts and are accordingly useful. Some reduce stress by a little or a lot. Some heal, some cure diseases, and others prevent you from being ambushed. You'll always want one of those abilities in your party. Otherwise, the game will bend you over and take away all the stress that you just reduced and a lot of the HP you just healed by not only throwing a group of enemies at you, but also shuffling your party around, so that you have to spend an entire turn just readjusting them. Also, don't camp with the shield breaker unless you know what you're in for. Bosses are definitely something worth talking about. All the bosses in the game have some gimmick related to them that make their encounters both difficult and memorable. An example of this would be the Swine King. He's a bit of a pushover if you know how he works, but on your first run of the game, you don't. You try to figure out what his gimmick is as you kill him, and you assume it's the little pig in the back named Wilbur, as Wilbur this whole time has been telling the boss to kill you. Naturally, you'll try to kill Wilbur thinking this will save you, but it doesn't. In fact, this is where the game gets you. It's not the boss that's dangerous, it's Wilbur. Killing Wilbur will enrage the Swine King, causing him to increase the damage he deals by a huge chunk, and he'll target all ranks at once as well. All bosses have some kind of gimmick or a little trick like this in some capacity, and thank God they do, because these encounters are definitely memorable. All of this applies to the DLC as well, if not more. Speaking of the DLC, let's talk about that. It's good. Talk over. Kidding, but I'll obviously make it quick. Crimson Court is great. It adds a new disease that you can't cure unless you beat it. The bosses are unique and interesting as well, but it's not like that's outside of what the game already offered. The whole story of the Crimson Court paints the ancestor in an even worse light. Turns out he plotted to murder this chick because she looked dangerous to him, and she probably was. So do you know what he did? No, he didn't just murder her. He drained her of her blood, made wine out of it, served it to his aristocratic guests, and then made them all eat themselves as they turned into blood-sucking abominations. And then he had an epiphany amongst all the degeneracy, realized the true nature of this world, and then set in stone the events which opened the Darkest Dungeon. Sounds like my Friday night, am I right? So that's what he meant when he said,
Yet I began to tire of conventional extravagance.
One thing that I thought was endlessly intriguing is that instead of basing their vampiric enemies on bats like other media, the devs instead used other bloodsuckers as the base of their designs. Mosquitoes, ticks, and insects. It's so genius that I can't believe someone hasn't thought of it sooner. Like I said, unique, despite being inspired by other lore. The Color of Madness is okay as a DLC. It's more content, and that's what matters. But if I have anything to say about it, it feels repetitive. Which is literally true, as it adds an endless mode to the game. Endless modes in other games are fun because they challenge how long you can survive. But in Darkest Dungeon, it lacks the frenetic pace to keep you playing the same battles endlessly. It's a shame it wasn't as good as I had hoped, but that doesn't change that, once again, the art design is just as beautiful, if not downright even better than anything the game has offered so far. It adds 3 bosses to the game, one of which is found roaming the halls of existing areas. It's downright creepy looking. Killing it grants you unique items from that boss, but honestly, the Crimson Court items are so good that I never swap off of them once I've found them. The Shieldbreaker is a great fit as a DLC character. It almost feels like she was necessary to play the game. And the Musketeer is, well, she's free. Regardless, Darkest Dungeon is one of the most grueling, most challenging, most maddening and stunning games I've played. There's a lot of content and a lot of intrigue, a lot to discover, and most importantly, a lot to enjoy. Darkest Dungeon 2 is in the works, and it seems to be inspired by the Mountains of Madness, so I'm quite eager to review and compare that as well. Anyways, play it! I know most of you are home anyway due to the hand-washing craze sweeping the nation, and if you prefer soy in your coffee, it's on the Switch as well, so you don't need to worry about that. More reviews down the line, so subscribe to keep up to date. My next review is a toss-up. If you want me to review a game, leave it in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and don't forget to stay calm and not stress out in the shadow of the Darkest Dungeon.
Ruin has come to our family.
Whew, hope that turned out alright.
Yeah, I'm gonna know to yours.
Yeah.